Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome to the launch of the Colmar Brunton Better Futures Report 2017. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Simon Roche. I'm the Group Account Director at Right Communications, and we're proud to partner with Colmar Brunton and the Sustainable Business Council to bring you this event. Can I just take a moment to thank all of you for coming this evening? An incredible turnout, an incredible response to the invitation, so we're delighted with that. And I know there are a number of people who have travelled from out of Auckland to be here tonight, so a special welcome to them. I'd also like to welcome those who have joined us via SBC's live stream online this evening. Welcome to you also. And a warm welcome to our speakers for the event. We have Sarah Bolger from Colmar Brunton, Abbie Reynolds from SBC, and we have three speakers from Meridian, Alison Howard, Jason Steen and Sarah Peacock. Turning our attention to Better Futures then, I think it's worth reflecting very briefly on the context for this latest Better Futures report. As most of you will know, Colmar Brunton have been doing the Better Futures research since 2011 and been monitoring changes in attitudes and behaviour since then. There's one thing that's changed a little bit though since in this last year leading up to this particular report that hasn't happened previously since the inception of Better Futures, and that's of course a significant change in the New Zealand political context. After 9 years of national-led governments, we now have a Labour-led coalition government with New Zealand First, and the Green Party is also in the mix. As an aside, if many of the issues that are highlighted in the research tonight seem familiar to you, that may be in part because a lot of them were the ones that were being debated by almost all of the parties as part of the election campaign last year. But the result of the election and subsequent negotiations is a greener government than we've had before. The brief glance at the summary of the agreement between Labour and the Green Party reveals a government that's keen to be active in the area of sustainability with a long to-do list in this area. A few examples from that: a Zero Carbon Act and Climate Commission, a new cross-agency climate change board of public sector CCOs, which is bound to impact on not only the public sector but their suppliers, comprehensive set of environmental, social and economic sustainability indicators, $1 billion investment in low-carbon industries by 2020, and the list goes on. But it's not just the political context that's changed. Abbie will comment a little later on the business context, but from a Right Communications point of view, we've certainly noticed a change amongst the consumer brands and the influencers that we work with. The brands we represent are more and more keen to include sustainability messaging in their mainstream communications. For some, there's been mounting pressure to act decisively and demonstrate leadership on an issue of industry or even legislative importance, and perhaps an example to mention is Countdown and the leadership they've shown in their policy to get rid of get down to zero single-use plastic bags. Others are niche eco brands, and it's their time to shine as certified products and services become coveted by consumers around the country. Not only do these brands, we find, want to do the right thing, but they also want to tell their sustainability stories to help them connect with their consumers. And that's where the influencers come in. We work with a lot of influencers, and they too have an obvious preference for sustainable, ethically produced products to promote. And that you can only assume that reflects the trends that we've seen in Better Futures over the years and the status, if you like, that sustainability now enjoys. So put those things together, and I'd suggest to you that the changing political, business and consumer context make this particular Better Futures report the most timely and topical one yet. I'm about to invite Sarah from Colmar Brunton to come up and take you through the report. Following Sarah's presentation, we'll hear from Abbie from SBC and the team from Meridian. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, so we ask that you save your questions for the end, and we'll try and work to time and make sure we do get some time for you at the end. And there'll be more refreshments afterwards, so you're invited to stay for a drink and a chat about what you've heard tonight. Before I hand over to Sarah, there's one thing that we want you, the audience, to do tonight. We want each of you to think about this. What is the number one sustainability goal for 2018 that you think your business should focus on? I'll say it again, what is the number one sustainability goal for 2018 that you think your business should focus on? We want you to have a think during the presentations, then write it down on a post-it note, which are over on the table over yonder, and stick it up on the wall chart just next to the bar. And what's going to happen with those is that Colmar Brunton will click them up, and when we come back in November for Better Futures 2018, they will report back, remind you of what you said and compare it to the research results at that time. So if you can join in and do that, we'd really appreciate it. Without any further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Colmar Brunton's Chief Client Officer, Sarah Bolger.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to echo the welcome from Simon to all of you here and those of you who are streaming in, and particularly those who have travelled. This is quite an unprecedented turnout. I have to say we were quite surprised at the level of interest in the sustainability report, our Better Futures report this year. And so much so, we were looking forward to showcasing our new green headquarters in the central city. But I'm really pleased that we have managed to find another location and that you've been able to join us tonight. I think the fact that so many of you have turned up this evening is also reflected in our findings this year. And these are the results of the 2017 piece of work that we've done. There was a bit of a delay because of the fact that we were moving and releasing the findings, but it has given us time to reflect on actually what are the key changes that we've seen in sustainability. And there are a few this year that are a bit more pointed than maybe previous years. The benefit of this Better Futures report, which is something that's very dear to Colmar Brunton's heart, is that we've been doing it for such a long time now. 9 years is the incredible amount of data that we've collected, and that means that we are able to see if there are some changes over time, and so we can see the impact of things that are happening as well. So I'm going to just be taking you through a few key points tonight. There is a bigger report that will be uploaded. And I'd just like to make a call out to my colleagues, John Carapiet and Danielle David, who have laboured on this report with me. John is has got a lot of knowledge in the area of sustainability, and Danielle has been very immersed in the data. So if you've got any specific questions that aren't covered here, then we may be able to dig into that data for you at a later date. So we're going to cover a few things tonight. This is the second year that we have looked at the Sustainable Development Goals and New Zealanders' perceptions of them. We'll have a look at that briefly. Then we focus a little bit more on the sort of the centre of concern for New Zealanders, and where are they? What's really dear to their heart? Then we'll look at some sustainable consumption. These are metrics that we've been looking at over time, and therefore we can see if there are any movements. And then we'll do a little look at some of the sustainable brands that are coming through. So, who do New Zealanders consider to be the leaders in sustainability? And at the end, we just thought we'd mention some hot topics that we think are really coming through. For New Zealanders, no surprises on a lot of them, but it's worth thinking about that given the emphasis that we've seen in the media particularly. And I think that's another point to make, actually, is that like never before, we have been seeing issues of sustainability broadcast in a mainstream level. No longer are issues around the environment and social issues just being, or particularly in environment actually, put into sort of green articles within some sort of insert in some magazine somewhere. These issues are rising to the top, and they are becoming talked about on a day-to-day basis. And it surprises me, actually, those barbecues that you have over the summer, it's amazing how suddenly sustainability is what people are talking about. So that's good. And I think it's probably reflected in some of the findings here. So, a quick view of how people are feeling about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I don't think there's probably anyone in the room here that isn't aware of those goals. There are 17 of them, and New Zealand has signed up to them. What we see when we ask people in New Zealand, are you aware of these goals? We can see there has been, encouragingly, an increase in the level of awareness by 5 points on 2016. So we've now got just over a quarter of New Zealanders who are aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that translates into nearly 900,000 Kiwis, adult Kiwis. If you then say that, well, those adult Kiwis are influencing younger generations as well, then we're reaching a pretty broad audience, which is really fantastic. The point to make here, though, is that of that 28% who know about the Sustainable Development Goals, only 7 in 10 of those people are aware that New Zealand has signed up to them. So there's still a job to do to raise awareness of them. We asked for each of the goals how important those goals were, each individual goal. And there's no doubt that they're all important. what we did look at is, okay, has that level of importance, so is the importance that people are placing on them increased at all? And we are seeing that in actual fact, for every single goal, people are placing a greater level of importance on them. So the average importance is being driven up. And the fastest rises in terms of which ones are important may not necessarily be ranked the most in terms of importance, but they are getting a lot more attention. And I don't think there's any surprise that life below water is becoming more of an issue for people, and that was one of the fastest in terms of importance that we saw an increase in from year on year. Industry, innovation and infrastructure as well, so how we run our country in terms of the way we, the innovation in business and the infrastructure that we have in place, that is increasingly in importance. Reduced inequalities, also a lot of conversation around that, and particularly latterly the gender equality issues. Responsible consumption and production, and then also climate action. So these are the ones that haven't necessarily been ranked as the most important overall, but we're seeing some real movement in them overall. Just thought it's also interesting to point out that if we sort of unpack this importance a bit more, there is a bit of a gender difference in how men and women view the goals. And what we did see in the data was that women are rating the goals as more important, but they're also more critical about how New Zealand is performing on them compared to men. There's probably quite a lot of discussion around that. The fact of the matter is that women do still tend to be the main shopper in the household, and they are more involved in day-to-day activities involving sustainable issues. But if we were to ask people, of all the 17 goals, what is the single most important goal that New Zealand should focus on? And as we saw last year, no poverty again rises up on the agenda. And I mean, I guess there's no surprises here in the fact that no poverty was, or eliminating poverty was an election issue, as was water. And in fact, water was considered most broadly the most important goal, but no poverty is considered to be the one that New Zealand really needs to focus on as a goal to achieve. So, just a note there also that climate action has increased in importance compared to the previous year. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So importance is one thing, performance is another. And I alluded to it before with when we looked at the gap between importance and performance. And there is no doubt that yes, these goals are important, and we're rating them quite harshly in terms of how well we're performing as a nation in achieving these goals. So we're seeing some small improvements in performance compared to last year, particularly on things like decent work and economic growth, quality education, sustainable cities and communities, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. But there's still a big gap between importance and performance, which I think we need to find a way to address. So that's the overall context in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, but actually we want to know a little bit more about what's close to consumers' hearts, and you get a sense from those, which ones are considered to be the single most important goal as to where New Zealand's heads are at. So we ask people to rate about 30, amongst 38 particular issues, which ones are they most concerned about. And this year we see in the top 10 issues that violence in society has remained at the top, along with protection of New Zealand children. Increasing cost of living is also coming through, and that was present last year as well. I think it's not unsurprising that this year we've seen some new entrants to the list, the top 10, and that is suicide rates they weren't previously included in our issues, but this year we decided that because there's been a lot of media attention around suicide rates, that it was worth putting it in there just to see how people were thinking about it. Build-up of plastic in the environment has, again, we put it in there as an issue just to see how people rated it, and it is in the top 10 of issues for New Zealanders to be concerned about. Along with that is cleaning up of New Zealand's waterways, another new issue there, and drugs, alcohol and addiction in society. So I guess there's no surprise really that the announcement about the inquiry into New Zealand's mental health, when we've got such issues as this, as the things that New Zealanders are concerned about. So differences between men and women actually aren't that great in those top issues, but where we do see some big differences are that women are more concerned about such things as nuclear weapons and nuclear power, the suicide rates, build-up of plastic, increased cost of living, mistreatment of animals, and the increased levels of homelessness. So this is where we see the biggest differences between men and women. So moving on from that, let's have a look at, talking about these concerns, but what are people actually doing to be more sustainable? And I think this is a really interesting slide because last year we were very encouraged to see that there was some movement in those people who had a low level of commitment to living a sustainable lifestyle. And they felt, actually, maybe I do need to get on the bandwagon and do something about it. This year, we're seeing a higher level of a commitment amongst those who are already committed. And that in itself is really, really encouraging. I think what's particularly interesting about that group who are highly committed is that, yes, they're women, but they aren't necessarily the highest income earners either. We're talking about a lower economic, socioeconomic demographic, and they are also likely to be older in profile. But the fact that we've got this movement is really very encouraging. And it does indicate that we're getting greater mainstreaming of sustainability and greater mainstreaming of people wanting to live sustainable lifestyles. So what are some of the key actions that people are doing? I often get asked, can you just tell me what are the things that people are doing to be sustainable? Because it's all very well talking about it, but actually, are they walking the talk? And naturally, those people who are doing these things most or all of the time, those things where there has been systemic change, where we've put in place systems and processes to enable people to do this, that's where we see the greatest level of consumption and behaviour. So recycling, being energy efficient in your home, buying locally produced products and reusing your water bottles and coffee cups are really high. We see that plastic bags is a big thing as well, and so it's great that Countdown have announced their targets for next year to ban plastic bags in supermarkets. If we look at these behaviours in terms of actually they're doing these things, but has there been a change over time? These are the things that if we look back to 2014 and say, what were the levels of doing this back then, we've seen some significant increases in the following. Definitely plastic bags from the supermarket. The other point is that people were saying that they are willing to pay a bit more for things that are sustainable, not a lot more, a bit more. Using public transport has gone up by 5 percentage points, and considering green energy sources is a new entrant here because we didn't ask it in 2014. I don't think it was so much available then as well. And choosing not to buy products that they don't have sustainability credentials for was not asked either. But there is, there are quite high levels on that. There's another interesting point here about plant-based eating, and we were quite encouraged to see this as a statistic because there's a lot of talk around plant-based food and diets and veganism and vegetarianism? Is there an actual change? Globally, we have seen statistics to say that there is a significant change, and we are seeing that reflected in New Zealanders' behaviour or claimed behaviour as well. It's obviously a lower base, but it's still encouraging. And we've also got here, we noticed that people are considering paying to offset their carbon emissions. So I guess the question is at what point do we think there's a big enough issue to make it a default position as opposed to one that you can choose to opt in on to be truly sustainable? So one of the big questions is, are people willing to pay a bit more? And I think that the important things is that to be sustainable, to save the earth shouldn't cost the earth. People really want to do the right thing, but they can't always do it if everything costs a premium. And whilst they say, 7 in 10 said that they would be willing, the fact of the matter is that 8 out of 10 of them are also saying that they'd choose to buy products because of the price, even those people who are very committed to sustainability. So it's important that we don't just categorise those people who are sustainability as affluent, middle class, white people. These are people across the board. They want to be able to live a sustainable life, and making it possible for them is really, really important, and giving them the handrails to do so. So there are a number of people in the room who will be wanting to know, is their brand recognised as being a leader in sustainability? And we'll start off at a category level. Just keep up the suspense. So sustainability, we saw this that year on year, it is increasingly influencing people's behaviour. It's not the only thing they're thinking of, but we are seeing that it is starting to shape and more and more how they're feeling about purchasing products. And based on the barbecue conversations over summer, I was astounded to hear how many people have really made a decision that they want to make changes in their life and they want to do the right thing. So I don't think there's any surprise that we're seeing these sorts of movements and influences behind some of these categories. Interestingly, though, insurance companies and banks and financial institutions are where we're seeing the greatest levels of sustainability as an influence, and we're not quite sure what is behind that. It could be a number of reasons, but it's worthwhile noting that the size of that difference, and something to ponder, definitely. But it's not just the role of the brand either to talk to consumers. Companies have a job to do with their employees in terms of sharing the love about sustainability success and how good it can make you feel. And 7 in 10 people say it's actually very important for them to work for a company that is socially and environmentally responsible. We saw this figure last year, and it's stayed up at that level. And 2/3 of Kiwis have said that they are willing to actually get paid less to work for a company that is considered to have stronger values and more sustainable values. Another point to make actually is that half of New Zealanders agree that it's only the most innovative and progressive businesses that take sustainability seriously. Now that figure has actually dropped over time, which again points to the idea that sustainability is becoming more mainstream. It's not just the most progressive. It is more and more companies are really jumping on this as something that is important to do, and it's the right thing to do, and consumers are going with that as well. So here, I'm afraid that the stats don't really translate into top-of-mind brand awareness for any particular brand at high levels. EcoStore, once again, tops the list, and we actually had to take off previous years because it just becomes far too busy. But EcoStore remains the leader when it comes to top-of-mind sustainability. It was a brand born out of sustainability credentials and has been leading the charge in that respect, followed closely by Fair Trade. Tesla is the one that has now leapt into people's minds a little bit. And then we see another whole host of brands. And that, I would say, is another encouraging point, is that there are more brands available for people to start thinking about at that very spontaneous level. If we then give people a prompted list and say, so given this list of brands, and most of the brands that we listed were for the companies that are represented in this room. So it is a little bit biased, but I think it's encouraging to see that, you know, people do recognise that there are sustainability credentials coming through for a number of different companies here, New Zealand companies. Tesla being the third most after the top two, EcoStore and Earthwise, which have those sustainability brand names. The Body Shop does well to a quarter of people. Whittaker's is New Zealand's most loved brands, along with another couple of brands represented in this room. And so, you know, there are different types of sustainability that people are thinking about when they're thinking about credentials. But what's encouraging is to see is some of these larger brands, larger corporates in the room, the likes of Meridian, Fonterra, Mercury, Air New Zealand. We've got Kathmandu there and Sanitarium at the bottom. So that is encouraging. Just to make a note, actually, that Z Energy and Trilogy, those are the numbers that they achieved in 2016. So Z Energy has dropped down this year in terms of its perceived, spontaneous prompted awareness of sustainability. So that's an interesting point. But our top endorsers and ambassadors for sustainability, being Trade Aid and Fair Trade, they are certainly the ones that people most identify with sustainability issues. And what are the main reasons? It's interesting that most of our concerns revolve around social issues, but when it comes to sustainability, our main default is, environmental, and that is reflected largely in the reasons why the brands that you see as being the most, leaders in sustainability are environmental reasons. So committed to or dedicated to the use of renewable resources, they care about the environment, focus on quality and natural ingredients. Fair trade is probably the one that does encompass some of those social issues. And I think along with the increase in the number of brands that are represented in our leaders in sustainability, we see a decrease in this rather confusing metric, which is asked if you agree that it's hard to understand the communication of sustainability by companies. People are saying that is actually shifting downwards. They're finding it easier to understand, but there's still a long way to go. We still need to get our stories out there, but at least we're tracking in the right direction, which is great. So there are three areas that I think have really bubbled to the surface this year, and I don't think they'll be of any surprise to you because much of it was talked about at the election. So water is one thing that has come through consistently, and 8 out of 10 New Zealanders, they cite the clean water and sanitation as being one of the most important goals at a sustainable development goal level for New Zealand to achieve. And I think the encouraging thing here is that they're not necessarily pinpointing anybody with that problem. They are saying as a collective responsibility for us all to play our part in that. And because it is such a big, big issue, it's all about, it's about our oceans, it's about our waterways, it's about the water quality that we drink, and it's about, reducing contamination and things. And so it's an all-encompassing subject. It is something that is very dear to New Zealanders' hearts. So 8 out of 10 say it's something we need to get right. 9 out of 10 say that actually we all have a part to play in improving the quality of our waterways. And it's just, I guess, a question of how do we do that? How do we enable people to do that? Plastic waste, another key issue that came through. So I guess We've termed this potentially as the next sugar. There is no doubt that Kiwis are concerned about this. It has arisen into it has made a presence in the top 10 concerns, and 2 out of 3 New Zealanders are saying that is something that they are concerned about. These concerns are being reinforced at a global level, at a local level, and also at a personal level. So if it is a big concern and people are talking about it, then we need to once again find ways to enable them to do something about it. And there are companies that are. Countdown have done a good job on that front. And the final hot topic is climate action. So climate action is one of the Sustainable Development Goals that it was the 4th most important goal for New Zealanders to focus on. And I think when it comes to all of the other concerns that New Zealanders are worried about, it's very difficult to address this one in a way that's very tangible for New Zealanders. So the challenge that we have here is that we need to connect the dots for people about how their day-to-day choices can have an impact. And we can see that some of the behaviours, the use of public transport, the change in plant-based eating, the shifts towards plant-based eating, they're not necessarily seeing that the importance of those things towards climate action. They're trying to do their bit, but those are the sorts of things that can make a difference. Energy sources as well. So those are the 3 key things that we felt that really rose to the top for us on this report. So what does this all mean? There are 3 key takeouts from today's presentation, and I'm sure that Abbie and our guest speakers from Meridian will have some thoughts on this. The first one is that we feel that there's been a shift and helped with sustainability issues being very much on the agenda of all the major parties at the election. It is moving from a peripheral to a central role in the value equation for consumers. And people are clearly saying that they want to be able to make the right choices, and they don't want it to be difficult for them to that, and they don't necessarily want it to be a highly premium or priced out of the equation situation. So helping people to make the change they want to see is all important. In terms of the second takeout, social sustainability issues remain very stubbornly high on the agenda, but they are still quite disconnected from the overall picture, and people are still defaulting to environmental only. So is there some way that we can align the government initiatives with business and consumer-based efforts to make us feel as though we're progressing in the right direction? And finally, like any effective marketing campaign or strategy, targeting the right initiatives to the right people is really central to success. And we have a lot of information now through this piece of work, through data analytics, through our understanding of what people are doing and how they're behaving, and through the use of data analytics to be able to target the right messages and target the right actions to people so that they can feel as though they can do the right thing. And using this behavioural economics framework is a good starting point. People want it to be able to be easy, they want it to be attractive, they want it to be aligned with social norms, and they also want it to be timely. So that's a good starting framework to understand how we can really get people on board with sustainability issues. I'll just leave you for a minute to read a quote from one person from our survey who detailed out what sustainability means to them and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I thought there are some really big things there, but there are actually some lovely small things as well. So this person is clearly highly committed, but it's good to remind ourselves of how committed some people are and what they're doing, and how can we make that easier for other people as well. So I don't think I'm going to be going and chopping down the trees in my garden for firewood to keep me warm, but I think it's a really lovely picture that somebody has painted about what sustainability means to them. So without further ado, I will hand back to Simon, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thanks very much, Sarah. That's great. Some fascinating and really useful insights there. A lot to take in, and on that, just to mention that the full report that Sarah was talking about, will be available on the Colmar Brunton website from tomorrow morning. So, opportunity for you to download it, digest it in more detail over your morning coffee. Our next speaker is Abbie Reynolds, Executive Director of the Sustainable Business Council. Now, Abbie reminded me a little bit earlier that she likes a bit of a fuss, likes a bit of fanfare when she gets up to speak. So likes to feel the love. So please feel free to clap your hands, stamp your feet, whistle, or maintain just a reverential silence for Abbie Reynolds.
That's a lesson I won't forget in a hurry. Thank you, Simon. Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Ko Abbie Reynolds tōku ingoa, ko SPC kai whakahaere ho. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Hi everyone, I'm Abbie Reynolds. I'm the SPC Executive Director. Hello to SPC members, it's lovely to see you here. Welcome back. I can't believe we've overflowed into the bar. I feel proud of you for that. Welcome to those people who I know but haven't said hello to yet, and welcome to those people who I haven't yet met. Hello to the people who are on live stream. We love the fact that we can bring you together and you don't actually have to be in the room. I think that's one of the small things that could be listed on that final slide about the small things we can do to be more sustainable. A really big thank you to our friends at Colmar Brunton. 9 years of helping all of us think about what consumers are thinking about and doing on sustainability. And it's really important to recognise that that data is critical, and it's played a really important role in how we, as the people doing sustainability, respond to what consumers are telling us. But that's part of how we're creating the shift. So don't want to underestimate how important what you've been doing for us is, and thank you again for involving us in this. I'm also really delighted to be able to say that Colmar Brunton have formally decided to join the Sustainable Business Council through their parent company Kantar, so also welcome to the whānau. So before I start kind of reflecting on what Sarah shared, and my God, wasn't there a lot there? Like I was right through that presentation was thinking about things I need to tell people, or I need to reflect, or I need to put on Twitter. And I'm not going to talk about everything because there's way too much. But before I even start talking about that, there are some bits of context I thought it was really useful for us to share. So the Sustainable Business Council, we are here to help businesses be the best for New Zealand and the world. And the impact we want to have is we want sustainability to be mainstream in New Zealand businesses. Now, what's really important about that is the only way we can do that is with great storytelling. Now, we do some of that, but actually what we need you guys as our businesses to do is also to be great at storytelling. Because what we need to do together is inspire the businesses that aren't yet doing this to do it well. They need to look at you, they need to feel envy, they need to feel inspired by what you're doing, and they also need to be able to back that up by understanding that you guys are creating value. So the other piece that's really important to us at the Sustainable Business Council is that we think about how we can help you get the maximum value from the big sustainability investments that you make. And so part of that is about helping you think about how you can build those connections with customers. Because we all know, those of us in sustainability, that that's one of the core places that the value turns up. If we can build preference with customers, or we can build reputation through sustainability, that's actually got genuine value as goodwill on our balance sheets. So how can we help you do that? And that's why we have a program of work which we call Consumer Decision Making, which is led by Alison, who I can't even see, but she'll wave to you vigorously. That's Alison who leads this work for us. Because we think it's really important that all of you can access the kind of data and insight you need to be able to go further on this. I think there's a really interesting global context as well, and Simon's touched on some of this, and so has Sarah. Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, biggest investor in the world, sent out his annual letter to CEOs this month, and in it he was very clear that the expectations on business from society now are greater than they've ever been. And that from his point of view as a major holder of funds for business, if he isn't seeing the businesses he wants to invest in, taking that seriously and really starting to respond to the expectations of society, he'll rethink his investment. Now that's a massive lever for business, and when Larry Fink tells the business world that, people really sit up and start to listen. So the macro things which are shaping this movement are really getting quite significant. There's real momentum. I think the other piece which is really relevant, again at a global level, is this week actually in Davos, Edelman have released their trust barometer, and the global trend is distrust in all of the 4 key institutions: government, business, not-for-profit and media. But business generally does better than government and media. So we've got this context in which more is expected of us, but we've got this kind of high standard over which we need to jump in order to convince people that, as businesses, we're doing the right thing. And then I have these moments of hope, which are kind of uniquely Kiwi. So PwC did their survey of CEOs recently, and it was kind of a bit of hidden away somewhere. 69% of our New Zealand CEOs said that environmental degradation and climate change were serious business risks. That was compared to 50% globally and 52% in Australia. Look, that's extraordinary to me. I don't think we would have seen that even 2 years ago, that New Zealand CEOs get that this is a business critical risk. So the context is shifting really fast. What consumers are telling us matters is being reflected by a whole bunch of our other stakeholders. So this is a challenging context. Don't get me wrong, I'm saying these things as if this makes it easy for you. But it's also a really massive opportunity, and I think that's why it's so neat to hear that consumers are telling us the same things, because, what are we good at in business? We're good at creating products for people who need them. We're good at telling stories to the people who need to hear them, and so this is our opportunity. So, I'm going to reflect a little bit on only 3 or 4 of the things I heard from Sarah today that really stood out for me. I think I agree. I think what we're seeing from consumers is a real growing level of awareness and concern about issues that those of us who've been in sustainability for a while, we've probably been worrying about for a while. And so suddenly there seems like there's more congruence between all the different places in society thinking about what it is we need to work on. And I agree with Sarah. I think we're seeing some really significant shifts in the mainstreaming of sustainability, and particularly with New Zealanders. We did a little bit of research of our own last year, and one of the things that we were really surprised by is that there are significant customer segments who are making choices about not buying whole product categories if they can't get sustainable versions of it. So let me put that in a more simple way. We were hearing from some particular segments things like, I only want to buy free-range ham and bacon, and I can't afford that, and so I won't buy ham or bacon at all. And I think that turned up in your new data point this year as well, Sarah, which is we've kind of got this kind of approach which is saying actually there's just whole categories of things I won't buy. And I think that was a bit of a surprise to some of our members who we spoke to about it. But I think the more interesting thing is the fact that low social economic groups are turning up. It has, sustainability has been accused of being a kind of white middle class thing for a really long time, so, because we're the ones who can afford it. And I think what we're starting to see now is that's really starting to shift. And when we hear that 30% of people are highly committed to living a sustainable lifestyle, what that tells me is that's a market segment in its own right. And I'm actually left with a whole bunch of questions, which I'll be talking to Sarah about later. I want to know more. Who are they? Where are they? What do they look like? What do they want to buy? What other things are they interested in? And I think what's really exciting about that is that we can actually start to say, actually, that's a segment we can go after. This isn't a sustainability as an addition. This is actually a whole segment which we can be talking about selling to. And I think that's a huge opportunity. I think one of the things which I was most interested in is that New Zealanders are still not finding it easy to identify our sustainable brands in New Zealand. For those of our members who consumers could identify, I am proud of you but not surprised. I know how hard you've worked and how much you've invested in making sustainability real. So, these are well-earned sort of statistics for you all. But that consumers can't identify more brands, it really isn't a surprise. And actually, it's something that SPC members talk to me about a lot. Like, it's probably one of the most consistent conversations I have with people, which is, we're doing these great things on sustainability, but we're just not finding a way of making it relevant for our customers. How do we do that? How should we be thinking about that? And I think, for me, I look at that and I go, what an awesome opportunity, right? How much fun is that going to be as we try to crack that? Now, again, making it sound easy, because I know lots of people have tried. But I think what we're seeing is that there's probably some things where, we need to think about doing some things a little bit differently. And there's some simple things that me and the team actually kind of have come up with. There's some of the things we're seeing which we think might be barriers to doing this brilliantly. These are small things rather than the big things, but sometimes the small things are really useful. My first point is, I'd really like to think that we've moved past the idea, which I've heard a lot, and not in the last little while, thankfully, that we're so good at sustainability, consumers should just know. Used to get that one a lot. And I think what that's predicated on is that consumers, New Zealanders, have the time, the energy and the expertise to go and figure out whether you're sustainable. I think what we heard from Sarah is people want to live these lifestyles, but they need us to tell them about it. We can't ask them to come and read 50 pages of our sustainability report to kind of take a view about whether or not we're sustainable or not. So I'd like to think we're past that. I'd also like to think we're past the conversation that says, yes, I think it's a priority to talk about sustainability, but I'm not going to spend any money on it. That we recognise that consumers need to know, but actually somehow that's going to be mysteriously earned. I think the businesses I see do this well consistently invest in it as part of their overall brand story. One of the things which has made me chuckle a great deal since she started working with us is Renee Graham, our communications manager. Renee, can you give everyone a wave? Renee often comes to me and will say things like, well, I was speaking to the comms team at X company today, and she had spoken to the sustainability manager, and can you believe it? Their comms team had no idea about all of these amazing sustainability things they're doing. I had to tell them. And, Renee expresses it to me in those sorts of ways. And we're surprised by how often the sustainability and comms and marketing people aren't talking, and how much rich sustainability storytelling there could be, but it sort of stays hidden in just a little piece of the business. And then I think the final thing, which is a little bit harder, and I'm always a bit curious about whether this is a Kiwi thing, and I suspect that Simon might have something to say on this, so perhaps this is something you could address. I said it once to one of our CEOs. I told him he needed to put on his big boy pants, because there is this conversation that happens about, well, I can't talk about that because all of these detractors are going to throw bricks at me because it's not perfect. And what we hear over and over again is that consumers don't expect you to be perfect, but they need you to be talking to them about this issue. And I've been really surprised by how often that's a reason not to communicate these issues, how uncomfortable people feel about talking to the world about what they're doing. And I think there are two reasons why that's probably frustrating is the word. Two reasons why that's a bit frustrating. One is because a lot of the time, these are businesses who I'm like, but I want you to, because I'm average New Zealand, and I want you to go out there and tell your story, and I want you to defend for me, your customer, what you're doing. But while you stay silent, you're not. And I kind of, I can't be on your team if you're going to stay silent about it. But the other piece is that purchasing habits actually change when consumers can trust what they see happening with materials or whoever's accountable. So we need to get more comfortable with transparency and visibility. And like I say, I don't know if this is a Kiwi thing or what it's going to take to break that, but I see that more often than I think should be the case. So Simon, over to you if you've got answers on that one. And finally, and no means least, because we've spent a lot of time talking about these as well, is the Sustainable Development Goals. Do you know the thing that astounds me more than anything? More than a quarter of New Zealanders know about them. Do you know why that astounds me? Because the government has been silent about these. I mean, I know how many of you are working on them, and a lot of you have done great storytelling about them. But what we've also seen, and again, this is another Renee story, sorry Renee. Renee has been working with Fairfax, who's another one of our members, on an 18-week series about the Sustainable Development Goals in the Sunday Star Times. And, one of the things we've learnt from that is the SDGs, the global goals, whatever that framework is or way of talking about it, is just not media friendly. It doesn't resonate for them. And so I think there's something really important in that, in terms of the role of the media to make New Zealanders aware of what's happening with the SDGs, but also for all of us. When we're thinking about telling our Sustainable Development Goal stories, be aware, not media friendly if you're talking about the SDGs. We need to find other ways of making it relevant for media and New Zealanders. But that doesn't answer for me how New Zealanders are hearing about the SDGs. So if anyone's got an answer on that question, I'm really keen to hear. So I think my final and concluding comments are, what I've heard today just really gives me great hope and optimism. It's always balanced by my sense of the urgency with which we need to act. But New Zealanders are really clearly telling us what matters to them. And that's a massive opportunity for business, I think. But there are some things which make me cautious, which I will just kind of run through. The first is there is always the potential for a gap between what New Zealanders think is an issue now and actually a sort of more independent assessment looking across the piece about where we should focus our effort. So for instance, if I think about the SDG dashboard, the 4 sustainable development goals we need to work on are zero hunger, life below water, life on land and climate action. So the intersection with what New Zealanders were saying with priorities is really sort of around climate action and probably around water. And what that tells me is that when consumers are telling us they care about something, it's a bit of a lag indicator. If you're thinking about managing these issues, if you're only responding when you've heard this from Sarah, it's too late already. And the reason that's a thing for us to reflect on is for those people who do sustainability and think about stakeholder engagement and then a materiality assessment, that's why. That's why that's such an important process, because you are thinking with your stakeholders about what the issues are consumers are going to be complaining to you about in 2 years' time. So part of this is about building enough lead time for you to respond to the issues that matter to them. And I think actually one of the things which really surprised me is plastic. That wasn't on anyone's agenda 2 years ago, and that has gone right off the charts super quickly. And the reality is we all know what the sustainability issues are for business. And so if we're not ahead of the curve and thinking about those issues early, we don't give ourselves the chance to have the trust with our customers to deal with the issue, and we're also at the risk of being punished for them for getting it wrong. So, I think, again, this is the how do we start to anticipate what consumers are going to tell us is important. And I think I was really thinking about what I want to leave you with in terms of the things that we need to be thinking about as the next frontier. I think if we can get it right and really help consumers think about what we're doing on sustainability and connect authentically with them, that's great. But the frontier that exists beyond that is that what the SDGs teach us is these issues are ultimately interconnected, that we are going to have to rethink consumption in some fairly material ways. And that the role of you and the audience as brands to help New Zealanders, to help people figure out how to live a more sustainable lifestyle that's also a good life is going to become really critical. And so that's the thing that exists beyond getting it right and building authentic relationship with customer now is actually how do we rethink the good life, and it's a sustainable good life. And on that, I will finish up. Thank you.
Thanks, Abbie, and thanks for putting me on the spot with that little question there around some businesses being a little bit risk averse around people throwing brickbats at them. Look, I think it's a fair comment. I think instinctively I would agree that New Zealanders can be a risk averse bunch, and business is no exception. I think the exception to that is we saw it in Sarah's presentation, that stat that said consumers equate sustainable businesses to innovative and forward-thinking businesses, and I think they will change things. But I think what I would say to it is that this piece of research is an incredibly powerful tool to change the mindset of businesses, because what this shows them is actually it's not a risk to be talking about sustainability, to be telling your stories. It's what consumers want. They want to know what you're doing. They want to hear about it. They'll support you. They'll buy your products and your services if they know that you're making an effort, even if it's not perfect. So in fact, you could argue that the risk is not to do anything, not to tell your stories and be left behind by those that do. Right. Next on the agenda, you'll notice during Sarah's presentation that Meridian featured on the list of brands that Kiwis associate with leading the way in sustainability. In fact, they've been a fixture on that list for several years. So a great opportunity tonight to hear from them in terms of their response to this and some of the things that they're doing. We have 3 representatives from Meridian that I'll introduce to you now: Jason Steen, Alison Howard and Sarah Peacock.
Ko Hikarangi te maunga, ko Waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Jason Steen a hau, kia ora tātou te whānui, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Steen and I'm General Manager of the CEO's office at Meridian with accountability for sustainability. For those of you who recognise place names, yes, I come from the east coast of the North Island. Having just returned from a break there this week, I'm finding this week a bit challenging, as I suspect are a few of you in the audience, so I will keep my comments to a minimum and not take up too much of your time. I'm well aware that I'm standing between you and networking drinks. We've been asked to share a few insights into the way that we think about sustainability, and I'm sure you'll agree that every organisation is different in the way that it does that, in the same way that there's no 2 cultures that are the same, and certainly no 2 CEOs are the same. So we're going to give you a little insight into some of our current thinking. I'd first like to acknowledge the wide range of organisations represented here today and the great work that and achievements that are being made by the people in this room in the field of sustainability. For Meridian, it's great to receive recognition through the survey, and it confirms our belief that the ongoing focus on sustainability remains worth it. Meridian's heritage, or kaupapa, as a 100% renewable generator has certainly helped in the first instance. And we've also had a succession of visionary chief executives and board members who right from the start have seen renewable generation as a right place to fit in. Sustainability is at the heart of what we do, and it's allowed us to authentically walk the talk in a way that reflects our culture and suits the culture and style that we have. At Meridian, we do most of the things that most of the people here would do, including measuring our carbon emissions and setting targets to reduce them. We recycle, reuse and repurpose, and we work in smart buildings for the most part. However, we recognised recently, in the really recent past, that the concept of sustainability is a lot more holistic than perhaps a few years ago, and we were struggling with an idea or a way of getting a unified thinking around a range of initiatives like decarbonisation, diversity and inclusion issues, brand sponsorship, investor, customer relationship and stakeholder relations, and overlaid with staff engagement. So we found that the SDGs are actually a great way of giving the unified focus to our initiative in those areas. And for us, the SDGs also act as a really good filter for determining whether some initiatives should even be started, and certainly once they're started, whether they should be followed through. I know finding a natural home for sustainability, accountability in an organisation can be quite difficult. In my view, the adoption of the SDG and the framework that follows them makes it easier to overcome those potential accountability barriers. It gives everyone a common language and goals based on a widely held set of similar values. So for example, I guess, Sarah, it joins some of the dots between the environmental and social initiatives. So in our case, it gives people charged with diversity and inclusion, and particularly gender equality issues, a tangible connection to those who are working more specifically on decarbonisation initiatives. So I don't think, in my view, it particularly matters where sustainability sits in the organisation, although it's key that the CEO leads the values that sit behind it. But it's important that all of the pieces that underpin holistic sustainability are pulling in the right direction. So in short, before I hand to Alison, we believe the SDGs offer any company a fantastic way to be authentic in sustainability without having to feel like you have to shout the loudest to be heard. So I'll pass over to Alison on that.
We are trying to be seamless, but bear with us. So many SDGs, do you really want to focus on all 17 at once? And some of these are things that you might manage in the background of your organisation, but not all of them are going to resonate with your customers or be the material issues that you need to manage as a business. So for us, it boils down to these two as the main platform for us to communicate externally. So not saying that gender equality isn't important to us, it definitely is, but these are the ways that we're going to talk the most when we talk externally. Climate action and affordable and clean energy, kind of fairly obvious that for a renewable energy company, these would be the ones that we would choose. Climate action in particular, we're a renewable energy generator. We generate 30% of New Zealand's electricity, so we make a massive contribution to New Zealand having 85% renewable electricity. And we have the opportunity to use that electricity to decarbonise transport, to decarbonise industrial heat. So that is very exciting to us as a massive opportunity for us. And SDG 7 is quite dear to my heart. I think from the research that we saw earlier, for me it's at the nexus between concerns about poverty, about well-being, and about the desire for renewable energy and a cleaner future. And I must say this is not one that's particularly easy, and it's not one where we have the answers, and this is one where we're going to be doing a lot of work this year to figure out what is it that Meridian could offer in this space that's really authentic and meaningful and that will resonate with our customers and stakeholders. Sarah asked me to talk a bit about, what does it take to get boards and CEOs across the line? And I thought, that's quite an interesting question, but at the same time, I almost feel like that's taking care of itself. I mean, from what Abbie was talking about, from the consumer research to what investors are increasingly demanding to what society is increasingly asking, I feel like we're in the middle of a cultural rising tide. And boards and CEOs are not immune to this. And what I'm particularly seeing from board members is they serve on multiple boards and they are starting to say to us, I'm on the board of that company and they're doing this and they have this kind of reporting and this sort of framework and where's yours and what are you doing? And so there is that increasing transference. And so I think to some extent that's going to take care of itself. So I wanted to talk about two key challenges that we've faced over the past sort of 10 or 15 years, and I've been in and out of Meridian for the last 12. The first that I have noticed the most from when I used to work at Meridian to when I've returned is we've been a 100% renewable energy company from the beginning, and we made a decision in 2004 that we were going to stay that course. It wasn't going to be accidental, we were going to keep that course. That was going to be who we were. But it was difficult to then get staff to pay attention to pretty much anything else. It's like, well, we are maintaining these big assets. We are enabling renewable energy for New Zealand. What do you care what size car I drive? I'll be damned if I'm going to drive a little electric Prius around. Like, I want my big four-wheel drive. So there are those challenges for us. Although I think we have shifted significantly. One of the things that kind of made me laugh when I was thinking about this was, if I go back sort of 8 years, if I was invited to do this sort of talk, I would have struggled to get anybody but me from my company to talk. But you see us here, there are 3 of us all competing to share our thoughts with you about how wonderful Meridian is and what our challenges are and how we can help you. And I think that's a real sign of how much things have shifted for us, and that this is the guy who is also head of our legal team and our regulatory team, me, head of sustainability, obvious choice, and our head of marketing, and that all 3 of us have a point of view. It's no longer kind of in a silo or one part of the organisation. I love that, love my job. The other key challenge that I think we face is marketing, and that is why we are so keen on this kind of research and why we are so pleased to be on that list. It's wonderful because you put all of this time and effort in trying to explain to customers how sustainable you are, and to actually have people be able to remember your name is like solid gold, because at times it feels like you are talking into an empty vacuum of empty space when it comes to this kind of thing. How do you make sustainability real and tangible? How do you translate climate change into something that's meaningful, something that people actually care about? How do you turn it into that? A conversation at the breakfast table, and how do you connect it to the values and the emotions that your customers hold when there are so many other things that are occupying their attention? So that's why I called this presentation Sustainability from the Inside Out, because that's how I feel we've been on this journey. We feel like we are sustainable from the very core, but how do we convince you of that in a way that doesn't sound, I don't know, preachy, arrogant, stupid, overreaching? Anyway, I'll leave it to Sarah to describe exactly how wonderful our marketing campaigns have gone.
Thank you for that intro, Alison. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Peacock. I'm the marketing manager at Meridian, who looks after the brand. I feel very privileged to look after the Meridian brand, and also tasked with retention, which is no mean feat in our industry, which has 40 retailers. Telling our where's the clicker? Hang on. Telling our sustainability story, which is part of Meridian's DNA, and it's a fantastic story to tell, is still really challenging because it's a very noisy marketplace out there, and there's a lot of retailers, as I say, 40, that are competing for customers. So for us, it's about sort of turning the renewable power generation and our sustainability initiatives, some of the great work that we're doing, and turning it into a story that's meaningful and emotionally connects with our customers and consumers, connects with their hearts and minds, and ideally is meaningful and becomes sort of a personal thing, and ideally helps them be inspired and gets them to do the right thing as well, and that every person should be doing their bit. And the key thing really is engagement. So we can't just tell a story and go, "Oh, job here is done." We really need our customers and consumers to interact with us. So from a marketing perspective, we're always thinking, how do we get cut through? How do we get people to actually engage and interact with what story we're telling? So a key thing we've found is partnerships is a really great way for us to tell our story and make it quite powerful, because let's face it, power's not that sexy to talk about. It's electricity. People kind of turn off when you say it. It's kind of complex. I'd like to see a show of hands here. Who actually knows what power company they are with? Well, that's pretty good. I ask every taxi driver when I get in a taxi, do you know which power company you're with? And 9 times out of 10 they have no idea. Oh, my wife sorts that out. Or I think I'm with Mercury, or is it Meridian? So there's real apathy in the market. So there's a real challenge for us to say we're doing this great stuff, and yes, it's Meridian, and we want you to be a customer, but we also want you to be inspired to be doing your bit in the sustainability space. Partnerships are key, and for us it's around partnering with people that share our values. So I'll just talk you through some of the campaigns we've done with some of our partners. Here's one. We decided that chocolate's way more sexy than power. Whittaker's is a customer of ours, which was fantastic. Who doesn't love Whittaker's chocolate? And Whittaker's, when they put out sort of a RFP for business, they really wanted to dial up their sustainability credentials, and they're really focused on firming up their sustainability strategy and framework. And so we said, look, we're the ones that you need to be working with, and so we won the business. Excellent. And then we worked with them to get a bid into ECA for funding to do a big energy audit, and we're working with them now. We've been working with them on that for about a year. So far, results, we've seen good results already, and it's just sort of really kicked off. For every tonne of chocolate, they've seen a 7% decrease in energy consumption, which is awesome. So fair trade's another thing which is dear to their heart. So we're working with them on the energy consumption side. We're also talking solar as well. So some cool initiatives, and it's about us walking the talk and being really authentic about our partnership, and then doing a campaign around it as well to tell that joint story. So we got Jeremy Wells, who's our kind of ambassador front man, and in the factory and sort of walking out of the turbine, making out like it just made chocolate through the turbine, and the wind power was, you know, making the chocolate. So we did social and digital around that, and to thank our customers. So from a retention point of view and brand, we sent our customers sort of around the Brooklyn area, a Brooklyn block, to say thanks for being a loyal customer, and here's just a celebration of our great new partnership. And we ran a competition around win a year's worth of free power and free chocolate by entering a competition, and we had outstanding results. So through joining up with Whittaker's, and as we know, Whittaker's is much loved, most loved New Zealand brand, we got some really fantastic cut through with that. But it's always you've got to work out at the very beginning of these things, what are the objectives that you're both trying to achieve out of the campaign, and we had to make sure that because their sustainability strategy and framework wasn't completely firmed up, we had to be quite careful about how we kind of talked about some of these sustainability initiatives. So a few challenges there, but it was a fantastic success. We're about to do a case study in Kia Ora magazine around some of the work we've been doing that. So look out for that. That's in March, Polly, is that right? Yeah. So great company to be working with. So electric vehicles, we haven't really sort of touched on that to date, but it's been a real focus for Meridian, and we're currently, our fleet is 30%, and we're aiming to be 50% this year. Our key objective is to grow awareness, educate, and increase uptake of consumers driving electric, because it's about getting fossil fuels off the road. And with New Zealand being 84% renewable, you're using renewable resources to charge up. So it's excellent. So we're kind of been on a real journey to electrify our fleet. So one of the other things we're doing as far as really walking the talk is talking to our corporate customers and really trying to get them into electrifying their fleet as well. And our procurement managers got some great learnings from the journey we've been on. So we're sort of always sharing them as much as we can to help businesses get their fleet to be electric. We did a big integrated campaign middle of last year, where we did sort of above the line, TV, billboards, we had some media partnerships, and we did a road trip with Jeremy driving electric from Auckland to Invercargill, and we sort of tied in our Kakapo partnership as well. And one of the key kind of messages that we wanted to get across to consumers is address some of the obstacles in people's minds around electric vehicles, that being range anxiety. We did have a challenge with we were 2 weeks too early when we were ChargeNet had just put chargers throughout the country 2 weeks after we did our road trip. So we did find ourselves in Timaru in a campground for 14 hours, I think, trickle charging. So that was a bit of fun. But yeah, it was excellent to kind of get that out there. We built a microsite. We partnered with Hyundai with their Ioniqs and ran a competition to give away an Ioniq. So got massive cut through with that as well. So utilising the power of that partnership was fantastic. And we're about to do something more March this year, so watch this space with Hyundai and just kind of really raising awareness. We've also partnered with a number of car sharing outfits that use electric. So in Wellington there's Mevo, and in Christchurch there's Yugo. We are in conversations with another outfit around electric buses for public transport. So that conversation is going on at the moment. So yeah, some really exciting stuff, and for us it's the right thing to do for the environment is reduce fossil fuels. The other partnership we have in play is Kiwi Properties, which they have shopping centres around NZ, and we have charging stations where people can charge up for free if they've got an electric vehicle. Zealandia. Does everyone know about Zealandia here? I'm sure you'll probably... time, okay, I'll wrap it up. So I get excited when I start talking about some other stuff. Recent partnership, 225 hectares urban sanctuary in Wellington, and we work with them to get a bid in with ECA to get electric buses. So they'll be replacing their diesel buses with electric, and we're talking with them also around to see whether we can do some sort of combined storytelling in the education program that they have. And the other really great partnership that we've been involved with is with DOC, with the Kakapo Recovery program. There's only 151 kakapo in New Zealand, so they are, extremely special birds, and so we want to play our part there, and we do some great sort of campaigns to raise awareness and try and encourage donations, and provide our customers with money can't buy experiences like be a kakapo ranger for a day down in Whanapo Island, which is pretty special. And KidsCan, we've been principal partner of KidsCan. We don't make a big noise about it. We think it's the right thing for us to do. I mean, we see an increase in poverty in New Zealand. It's a real problem. And we know that if kids don't, get a good start to the day with food in their tummies and are warm, it's going to be hard for them to learn. So this is a partnership that is we truly think is the right thing for us to be doing. And a more recent partnership with this innovative, only about 3 years old, Conscious Consumers. They're all around, their kind of key focus is around getting consumers' buying behaviour to influence businesses to do the right thing. So businesses go through accreditation, which we have as a partner, and they promote those businesses that are doing good stuff to consumers, and then consumers kind of vote through their buying behaviour really, and then kind of show businesses what's really mattering, what really matters to them, so that business can then change or dial up or dial down some of their practices. So that's me in a nutshell. Sorry I took up too much time between you and a networking drink, but thank you very much for listening. And I think we all need to play a part, which we all are in this room, and it's about telling that story and getting people inspired. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, and the rest of the Meridian team. Some great insights there into your sustainability program and some of the examples of how you're telling your stories. I am conscious that we've run a little bit over time, but I'm also conscious that you've been patient with your questions. So I'd like to at least give us the chance to get through 2 or 3 questions before we stampede towards the bar. So if I can invite you to, if you do have a question, please stand up, big loud voice, and let us know who you are and who you would like to address your question to, and hit us with your questions.
Simon Harvey from Coxswain. I have a question for Sarah. And we love this research as advocates and consultants for sustainability to help get clients on board with the message that other people are doing this, that consumers or, let's say, citizens and customers really care. But one of the things that came through from your presentation, what I wondered about was a lot of, let's say, general public or citizens' opinions are probably shaped by the media and what they read and advertising campaigns. And I just wonder, given what we know from the Edelman Trust Barometer and our own experiences, that the media are not one of the most trustworthy, independent providers of balanced information, how does that affect the way that we might present the data that you've given us here? Because some of the questions that come back are, well, one, would they really do it? And 2, where did they get their opinion from?
Thank you very much for your question. It's a great question. Look, I think there's no doubt that people are influenced by what they see and they hear, ever more so because we're being bombarded by so many messages, and it's hard for them to sort of tease out what is important and what's not, and where do they sit in the equation. I think if I come back to something that Alison was talking about, is that if you're wanting to talk about messaging with your businesses, it comes back to what is going to be meaningful and relevant from where you're coming from. So Meridian have highlighted the areas that are absolutely true and authentic to them, and they can easily translate that into something that is a good consumer story that people can get their heads around. So people will not pick up on messages that are not, that they can't identify with, or that isn't meaningful to them. So I think certainly if we can use those contextual issues, we know which ones are important, that people are thinking about, but always come back to what is important to you, what is the brand that you're representing, and how do we connect with you in a way that is meaningful on issues of sustainability. That's always helpful. Always a helpful start point. I don't know if that's answered the question, but...
Anybody else? Yes, just here.
University of Waikato Management School. For you again, which like eyeballing you, Sarah. Interesting research. Do you look into also barriers? It's easy to answer a question and say, yes, I would do this, I would do this. Do you ever say, what would stop me doing it? What am I frightened of? You mentioned behavioural economics, which I was very interested to hear. But I just wondered how much of those nuanced questions you asked.
Well, we're somewhat limited in what we can ask, and so we're interested in sort of getting to the grassroots behaviour. What are the main things that people are doing? But I think that's absolutely, what we're grappling with is how can we turn what people say they want to do into action? And there are lots of barriers in the way. We saw some of them. A lot of them revolve around just getting over that day-to-day. I've got so much else on my plate. But yes, there are ways and means of getting to that. This is not necessarily the forum to do that, but certainly there are means to do that. Yeah.
Right, do we have one more before we adjourn? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Go.
This is a quick question. Josephine from Environmental Solutions. We're doing a piece of work around the SDGs as well at the moment, as a number of people are. But my question is, did you show the people the infographic and ask them if they'd seen it, or did you ask them if they'd heard of the Sustainable Development Goals?
So that was, did we show them the infographic? The first,
Said to me, I've seen the image. Oh yes, that great infographic. It's colourful, it's lovely, people remember it. They don't actually understand how to work out what's meaningful for their business and do the assessment.
That's right. No, so initially we just ask them about the Sustainable Development Goals with no prompts, and then when we do introduce them to them and say, this is the list of them, and how important do you think they are? So there is a combination of unprompted and prompted.
Last one, I don't want you to miss out.
Oh, okay. You had a series of questions about behaviour change, and we know from the start that people are interested in New Zealand's social issues of future policy service. But all the behaviour change questions were around environmental actions.
Yes.
Are you recycling? Are you, eating this meat or whatever? Were there any social behaviour change questions included?
We can look into that, but we are, again, because this is a longitudinal study, the only way to get change is if we ask the same questions. So I think given that social issues are so much on the agenda, we gradually introduce social things. So
I guess that was one of the points is, people still default to the environmental side of sustainability, but if we're not asking about the social side, it's driving them in that direction.
Yep. No, it's a good point, and I think we've started to introduce some of those things. So hopefully, down the track, we will be able to see whether that, we're having an impact on those things as well.
Thank you for your questions and for your attention. We'll wrap it up there. But please join me in once again thanking our speakers, the two Sarahs, Abbie, Alison, and Jason. Thanks again for coming tonight. I trust you'll take away a lot of useful insights to reflect on and hopefully act on during 2018. Please, as I say, do stay and join us for a drink and a chat. And don't forget your post-it note over there wall chart by the bar, your most important goal that you think your business should be focusing on in 2018. You can do it while you're waiting in the queue at the bar. Thank you very much.